Before we start with the contents of the course, you might want to know who I am, or at least what type of philosopher I am. So, as a short introduction, my name is Hans Doormalen. I work at the Department of Philosophy of Tilburg University, and I got mainly a teaching job. So I teach philosophy of mind to psychologists in Dutch, first philosophy, and in English, philosophy of mind. I do this together with Stefan Blanke. And that's a first year course, and there's also a third year course that I teach together with Michael Vlerik. That's a philosophy of science course, also in Dutch, wetenschapsfilosofie. And I teach philosophy of mind in a course, Mind and Brain, for liberal arts and sciences students, together with Jeroen Stekelenburg, who then does the brain part of this course, so the part of the course that gives you an introduction into the brain and its workings. Together with Herman Recht, I teach a course in neuroethics with a long philosophical introduction called Brain and Morality. That's a second year course, a really small course, intensive course with a lot of writing. So if you're not a liberal arts and sciences student, there's not a lot of room for non-liberal arts and sciences students, but there is some room. So if you want to do that, contact me and we'll see if you meet the requirements and whether there actually is room for you. And to philosophy students, to the bachelor students, I teach together with Herman Recht a course in epistemology, in Dutch, and in English. I assist the master thesis students with finding a topic and a supervisor for their master thesis. So that's basically what I do at Tilburg University. I have taught a lot of courses at different universities, different other locations. So I've lectured on philosophy of mind in Groningen at the Rijksuniversiteit. I have taught courses at the Radboud Universiteit in Nijmegen, at both universities of Amsterdam. I've taught philosophy in high school. We have two types of high school where philosophy is being taught, HAVO and VWO. I did both the last classes there, so the topics for the exam. This was in Bergen op Zoom. Really nice, really good to teach philosophy to high school kids. So what else? Well, I got my, kind of Dutch version, old Dutch version of the master's title, doctorandus. At Tilburg University, I wrote a thesis on metaphors of the mind in Dutch. My supervisor was Philip Bukens, who's now my colleague. And this was in the area of philosophy of language, so analyzing the language we use to think about the mind. Later, I then went to write my PhD thesis on the evolution of consciousness. I did this under the supervision of Ton Derksen in Nijmegen. Parts of what I wrote here now are contents of the philosophy of mind courses I teach. So, as I said, there are two types of high school in the Netherlands where philosophy is being taught, and it's quite recent that this is on the program. And when I taught philosophy in Bergen op Zoom at this high school, I had both high school types, HAVO and VWO, and VWO is the more difficult one, so there was only a book for those kids, and not for the kids in the HAVO class, and I really didn't like it. I did HAVO myself, so I did HAVO first and then VWO, and what I find really not nice to have to say to my students was, well, here's this difficult book, and you don't have to do this, and you don't have to do that, and you don't have to do this. I thought it's a separate school type. it's proper education. So there should be a separate method for in philosophy for those HAVO kids. And well, I knew someone at the University of Groningen where I worked then as well, and I knew that someone was writing a new method called Cogito, I think, and well, took some emails, but the publisher in the end at least wanted to make a workbook for a separate workbook for HAVO. So that was the first HAVO philosophy book, and I wrote this together. I made these workbooks, not the method, together with Eva Anne Coulter, who actually made the method, and the workbooks I made together with her and my dear friend Bas Jongernelen. Later, the publisher I published most of my works with is publisher Boom, not Boom. Boom it means tree. It's a family name. They also they already had a method, but they made a new method, and this time they actually made a method for both high school types. And together with Herman Recht, I wrote the piece on epistemology, the chapter on epistemology, slightly different for HAVO, of course, than for VWO, and now they both have their own textbooks. And it does really well. It's being used at a lot of high schools, and recently the revised edition came out. So, well, students are actually reading this epistemology chapter we wrote. For our own students, we also made some textbooks together with the late Marie Schouten. Stof tot Denken is a Dutch introduction into philosophy of mind. It's quite difficult. It was meant for third year students, second year, third year students. And Exploring Humans also will be available in a revised edition within a couple of months. Is a philosophy of science, introduction into philosophy of science for the social sciences. So Herman, Maurice, and we were thinking about we were talking about the books we used in our philosophy of science courses, and none of us were really satisfied with them because we're teaching philosophy of science to students of economics, sociology, psychology, and all the proper philosophy of science books are written with all kinds of examples from physics and quantum mechanics and chemistry and stuff like that. So we decided to write a philosophy of science book, especially for the social sciences ourselves. So that's what we did, and Herman and I recently updated it, and it will be available in a couple of months, I believe. I also wrote 8 questions about the conscious mind. That is an introduction that doesn't presuppose any knowledge of philosophy, of psychology, of neuroscience, of cognitive science. So I wrote this with that in mind for my liberal arts and sciences students initially. Because, well, in their very first year, in the very first semester, they got this introduction into philosophy of mind. And, well, if you are a first year student in your very first semester, you might not know anything about philosophy or psychology or brain sciences, neurosciences, cognitive sciences. So I thought it should be an easy, accessible book that introduces students into the mind-body debate, basically, in a historical fashion. So that's what I did, and when psychologists decided that the philosophy of mind course should not be in the third year, but in the first year, then this also became the required material for that course. And the second part of the philosophy of mind course for psychologists, I used a book by Sue Blackmore, a really good book, but there are so many different editions available, and the page numbers change, and so it's really inconvenient. So I am writing a book for the second part of this course together with Herman Recht, but this is really in the early stages. So that will not be available within the next year or something like that. So in Dutch, I wrote together with Herman Recht two popular philosophy books. One is called What Nonsense, What an Onzin, and it is basically an introduction into the philosophy of science for the broader public. And the second book, Het Snapgevoel, is about the feeling of understanding. So it's a book on epistemology, on theory of knowledge, that we accept things when we have a good feeling, that we have the feeling we know something. So that's for the broad public. And the last thing I want to tell you what I did, so that gives you some impression of who I am, is that I wrote a philosophical detective with Descartes as a kind of Sherlock Holmes solving murders in Amsterdam. In the book, of course, I explain his philosophical, his scientific method, basically. Not that I am a Cartesian, absolutely not, but I think he is a fascinating figure, and I've tried to fit in all kinds of elements from his actual life in his fictional novel, of course, together with all kinds of facts on about Amsterdam and Dutch trade and the way Amsterdam was organized and stuff like that. So I hope this gives you some idea of who this guy is that is teaching your course, so that you have some idea of why I explain things or why I stress certain things and not others.